Welcome to episode 7 of the DWRD Net Stationery feed. Today on the show we have Lisa S., also known as Olive Octopus Ink. I just want to mention at the start, Lisa is going to be showing some ink swatching process today, so if you happen to be listening to this on the audio-only version, make sure you go over to YouTube and look at the video version so you can see all of that swatching goodness and see the process. So Lisa, I'm glad we were finally able to get a chance to record an episode. Welcome and thanks. So to get started, just introduce yourself and give a brief overview of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Lisa. Go by Olive Octopus or Olive Octopus Ink. Real cool to get a .ink domain. So if you're into ink as much as I am, that's a good place to start. I like to explore the fountain pens and the papers and art, but it all sort of starts with ink and exploring all the different colors and properties, and that's the main draw for me in all of this.
No, that's great. Lisa and I met through our local pen club, and I'm very spoiled to have a local ink encyclopedia who can show up at pen club with swatches. That's always great. So as we get started, we have kind of some of these standard questions I've been asking all the guests just to kind of level set, see what, if listeners can see how they relate to you in terms of preferences. So to start, what do you currently have inked? What have you been writing with lately?
So at any given time, I usually have a whole library of TWSBIs in different colors and a whole bunch of different types of pens, different nibs, different grinds. So usually a lot, but I've picked out 4 things that I've been using recently to talk about real quick. So first, I've got a couple of pens from recent pen shows. One pen that I picked up at the Arkansas Pen Show that is currently inked with Ink Institute Gray J. It was a nice match for this. It's a chroma shading ink from Gourmet Pens, made by Ink Institute. So that pen has a Kodachi grind on it, or not a Kodachi, that one has the katana on it. And then the other pen I've got from the Atlanta Pen Show from our local pen maker friend. Oh, there's some thunder. We're recording this during a thunderstorm. So this one is from TriStar Studios, our friend Scott. Stabilized wood pen with a surprise resin section. That one is inked with Tacha Kwame, which is vibrant orange, kind of a burnt orange color, and I've got a blade grind on this. So both of those pens have sort of a thinner vertical, thicker horizontal line. Really shows off the shading, the chroma shading and shading in those inks. And then 2 others that I've got inked up right now are a Pilot Falcon pen, and not to be confused with the Falcon nibs, that's a whole thing, and a Franklin Christoph with a cursive italic, fun eyedropper pens. These I'm excited about because of another pen community friend has these new inks. Trusted by a valve, don't trusted by a valve. Long story. You can go to Ink Dependence Mike to figure that out, but these are 2 new inks from him, so I've been trying those out. So those are the 4 pens I've been using most recently.
No, that's great. It's nice to see the variety. And just to kind of follow up on that real quick, do you try to match ink colors to pens, or do you kind of go a new ink? In general, do you try and match, or do you just kind of go any ink goes with whatever you feel like writing with that day?
It varies a lot. I do try and coordinate a bit because I have so much inked. I kind of want to have some idea of what I'm getting into. So if a pen is predominantly a certain color, I might pick something that matches that or something that coordinates with that. So I have at least some sort of vibe of where we're going. Then there's some pens like this that are antique glass and anything can go in it, but I can see the color in there. So this one gets any color. Whereas this one is pretty matchy, so that I've got this cool kind of slightly pinkish brown, which goes with the taupe color here. So I do try and coordinate a little bit so that if I have a certain color pen, I get some idea of what I'm looking for. But most of my writing is just for me, and so any ink goes, shimmer, shading, all sorts of things, and I like the variety.
No,
and
very
always
cool.
Switching it up.
So if you had no budget, money was not an option, what is your grail pen? If someone were to hand you any pen ever made, what would it be?
This is a really tough question. So I'm really into maker pens, and so that's mostly what I aim for. But some of the more artistic pens I like to look at, and those are a harder sell for me to get a pen that's like that handmade and such. But there is one that always catches my eye, and well, there's a series of them, but it would be and I'm probably pronouncing everything wrong, but the Nikayas with the Irushi. That is the uh, like Heki Tamanuri, which is the ones that are sort of a warm brown, and then you have the underlayer of sort of a bluish green that comes through. There's the Decapod twist, the one with the fins. There's a whole bunch of different styles, but like if money was no object, that style of the Irushi with the brown and the greens really taps into the earth tones that I like so much. So that would probably be the grail.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Irushi being so unique and sought after, having something that matches a friendly color palette definitely
Mm-hmm.
would be a great way to answer that question. Because that's still a maker pin of sorts. It's a production
Mm-hmm.
maker pin, but that art that goes into the Irushi work, kind of settles a little bit of both.
Yeah.
So you already mentioned this. What are your ink preferences? You say any ink goes, since a lot of your writing is for yourself, shimmer, sheen, and whatnot. Do you obviously, you know, you have a lot of ink that we'll get into later, but
Yeah.
for regular writing, do you go back to known favorites, or do you like to just keep using new samples or new inks that come across your desk when you're filling pens up, assuming they match the pen, of course?
Yeah, yeah, match or coordinate. So, I say kind of some of each. I've got some go-to favorites. Right now, I'm mostly sheen. Well, I mean, I've got ink all over my fingers all the time anyway, but sheen, I end up getting smearier and stuff. So, I'm really leaning a lot into shimmer and shading and chroma shading right now. And I've got some favorite go-to inks that I do ink up frequently, but I always balance that out with new things to try, like getting these TWSBI valve inks. I got samples of those in Atlanta, and just am excited to try those. So I end up with a mix of both. Maybe a quarter familiar and three-quarters new. I'm trying to get new things through because people want to ask questions about stuff, and it's like, even though I've swatched everything, it is different to write with them and put them in pens. So I want to get through trying as many inks as I can, but there's definitely some go-to inks. Tasha Anizu, Colorverse, Alpha, UMA, Ursa Major, Shirakashi, and Ume, also Sailor Inks. Those are some swampy greens that I go to a lot. Also Alpha PSC from is another Colorverse star, one named after a star, and some, Colorverse Iris Nebula is purple with shimmer. Some of those I keep getting drawn back to those favorite colors, but that's a small portion, and trying new stuff more often.
No, that's great. So, pens and inks we've obviously covered, but in
Mm-hmm.
terms of paper, I know you use a lot of papers when you swatch that you'll go into later when we get into that portion, but just what are some of your preferred papers just for general writing? Like if you're writing notes down for your desk, or keeping track of inks or an inventory,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of your preferred papers just for general writing, not necessarily for swatching purposes?
Sure. Yeah, you'll notice one of the themes for me is I like trying different things in variety, but the things that I go to most often to keep sort of my schedule and to-dos in order, I have a Hobonichi Weeks. Mine is fairly functional. The paper's been complicated with that one, but for now, at least, I've been still using for this year a Hobonichi Weeks. I've got these Oasis Profolio notebooks that have the interesting ruling. I like using these for writing just random notes or doing currently inked. I really like all sizes of the Moramon. So some of my notes for this very meeting, this very interview here, are on various sizes of the Nemesine or the Clyde Nemesine pronunciations. But for Moramon, those are some of the main things that I go to for writing.
No, and that's great. I love the Nimacine. That's a newer to me paper, but I already
Mm-hmm.
have more notebooks of that than I care to mention, especially the Clyde version. I love that small grid. So
yeah, the small grid, and it's my green colors for the covers. So just that, yeah, those hit it out of the park for sure. And I like that paper a lot for just everyday writing.
no, yeah, it's great. So this is one of my favorite questions to ask, and I think it's been one of the favorite ones for people to answer so far. What is your favorite stationery adjacent item? And just to fill in what that is for people who are listening or watching, something that you use with your stationery, but it's not truly stationery. So like a bag or a lap desk, a book weight. What are a couple of your favorite stationery adjacent items?
Yeah, we already talked a little bit about how it's hard to pick, but as if you've ever seen me at a pen meetup or a pen show, I'm sort of a walking advertisement for our friends over at Rickshaw. So this is the big Rickshaw bag, and then we've got the pouches of swatches. That's the little one. We got the big one because it doesn't fit all in this one anymore. I've got octopus on here. I love all the designs. I love being able to fit oodles and oodles of pens protected safely. Papers. I got this at the California Pen Show. All of this is Rickshaw. So Rickshaw just keeps me organized and all my stuff safe. All this stuff has been carried all over, from California to Atlanta to just local pen meets every week. This is not a bag I get out a couple times a year. This bag has been used. This stuff is used like on a weekly basis, and it is held up fantastic. So that's my favorite. But a few honorable mentions are you always got to get some pen crabs to hold your pens. And I'm just going to mention this little guy here. So this is something I picked up at a local kind of craft fair makers market. Little cup, just anything like this that can just be a little friend, something interesting on the desk to help hold the stuff. The little crabs, the little characters. I think that makes everything more fun. So
No, that's great. And your bag, it's kind of like Mary Poppins of ink. There's so many swatches and samples that can come out of there.
I'm real good
It's
at packing it. It gets a little discombobulated as a pen meetup or whatever goes on. I was like, how did all this stuff come out of here? But I'll get it back in and shuffle off eventually.
so let's get into the important part. How did you get started in the ink swatching hobby, and when was that?
So, I kind of found my way over into this side of all the analog writing and the colors and the inks by listening to tech podcasts on the Relay Network, formerly Relay FM, but they've dropped it to just Relay. But I was listening to tech podcasts over there, but there's another podcast on Relay FM that some people may have heard of, a little podcast that's been going on for a minute here called The Pen Addict. And then there were other people who knew The Pen Addict, like there's another podcast about art and being a creative person called Make Do with Tiff Arment and Julia Scott. Listening to those various things, I'm like, okay, what's this pen stuff? And then seeing people like Tiff Arment from Make Do, she got the infamous color ring and spent a time on Instagram. She was reswatching all of her inks onto a color ring and spreading them out and just seeing this rainbow of color. I was like, what's that? What's going on here? And then some TWSBIs. I now have, trays and trays of colorful TWSBIs with different inks in them. So, sort of their adjacency to the Pen Addict and that being present on this otherwise, mostly about Apple tech podcast, is sort of where I found out about all this and was able to learn. But, seeing specifically the color ring and these sort of swatches, that's where I was like, I want that. And that was like maybe the end of 2019, early 2020. You might remember some stuff happened in 2020 where all of us sort of maybe had some different hobbies, maybe some stay-at-home hobbies. So later on in 2020, around the fall, is when I got my first TWSBIs, and it will surprise no one to know that the first thing I did is order 15 bottles of ink. So, and some color rings and a glass dip pen, and just went straight into the deep end of the ink. So
So in the larger scheme, you're still relatively new, but you jumped in deep from the start, and
Yep.
it's interesting to see how, because I do the same thing when I start a hobby. It's all in. There's
Mhm.
not dipping the toe in. It's just jumping in, and it's great because then you know you can you experience the hobby through a fresh set of eyes, and sometimes that's good to see other people coming into the hobby and go, oh wait, look at them, they're doing this, and that's a completely different way they were introduced to things, and it kind of reinvigorates your own views of the hobby. So that being said, you know, you have a lot of inks. What's your current count, and where do you store them?
So the current count is a little bit yet to be determined, but the last I do have a, if you're not familiar with Fountain Pen Companion, it is an excellent resource where I do keep track of all my inks. I said my pride and joy is public. You can see everything that I've got pretty much right there. But that number is a little high because I've included some stuff like shimmer potions and such that I don't necessarily count in the official count. So my official count was 984. And so just really, really getting right up to the edge of that 4 figures. And then a friend who is part of watching some of the stuff that I do just sent me a whole bunch of samples that definitely put me over 1,000. So somewhere in the early thousands. Um, if you go to Fountain Pen Companion, as I did recently, and actually scroll down and look at the breakdown between bottles and samples, it's kind of 2/3 to 1/3 actually bottles more and 1/3 samples. And the bottles, for the most part, are in these alpha. Uh, what are these called? No, alpha's the other thing. Alex drawers from IKEA. And so I've got this big tower. I've got the shorter tower of 5 drawers that's, yay high. And then a wider one that's got that, but it's all in Alex drawers. The sample vials and sample racks in some of the narrower drawers. And then the bottles, roughly organized by brand. Fix that. And just mostly within reach so I can have everything to hand.
No, that's neat to see, because with that volume, you have to have some sort of organizational system. I've
Mm-hmm.
got a couple of shelves because I'm at the measly 125, 126 ish level, where yes, it still takes a lot of space to store, but nowhere near that kind of volume. So it's good to see, especially as people who are getting started need to have a plan for storing their inks, especially if they have limited space. That seems like a good way to store a decent volume and not have that large of a footprint. So let's get into some actual swatching, because I know some things that I've seen is you've talked about many times on your Twitch streams or just pen meetups and whatnot. You're a big proponent of when you swatch to use solid tools versus a Q-tip. And since we knew we were going to be doing this recording, I just picked up a new ink from Butler Stationery. We were actually there for a coffee meetup earlier today. So you have a brand new sample that you haven't touched yet. So I know you're going to switch to your overhead camera view as if you're doing a Twitch
Mm-hmm.
stream. And this is just a plug. We'll talk more about Twitch and streaming later, but this is kind of what, people might know Lisa from, is the overhead view showing a ink swatching process. So just take that new ink sample and kind of walk through your entire process, as if you're doing a stream like you do. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
people send you samples all the time and you have them and you kind of go through. So just kind of walk through and kind of narrate your process as you go. And I might pop in and ask a couple of questions, but this is more of, it's great to have this recorded so that people can see how this swatching works, give them ideas of tools they might want to use or might want to try and things like that. So why don't you take it from there and kind of
Yep,
walk us through your process?
absolutely. So the first thing, so we looked at the bags of Color ring cards. So this is the Color ring card at this size. Um, that over here, and then this is the Color Dex card. So I end up swatching both. The Color ring and the Color Dex get sorted differently, where the Color ring is more by color and the Color Dex is by brand. And That way I can have sort of a roving copy and then more of a stay-at-home copy, and then the Colodex gets a little artsy, but we'll talk about that in a second. So I usually swatch both of these at the same time for every ink that I get. This is a sample. This is my little buddy sample holder from Inkapet. So I'm going to open this. That will keep it from tipping over on my desk. And talking about the wanting to use a non-porous tool versus the Q-tip that soaks up so much ink, this is something that I found. It's just a tiny little kind of a carving spoon from a kit of various pointy and scrapey tools for wax carving or other sorts of technical things that you might be doing some fine work for. And I just found this in my toolbox, but this happens to be just an excellent tool for this. We'll talk about some of the other things I use in the next step, but this is what I've ended up using for these swatch cards. So I just get a little bit of ink, and this is the Private Reserve, an ink from Private Reserve called Kickstart My Heart Red. So,
and I picked this up at Butler Stationery. This is actually one of the first numbered box inks that I had seen, so I thought that was unique. And I always try and pick up something each time I go to a stationery store, even if it's just another bottle of ink. So I thought this was a good one, since it wasn't on Fountain Pen Companion yet. So when I looked it up, it was not yet entered there. So this will be probably one of the earlier swatches, because it just came out recently. So just a little plug of what that ink is and kind of how it became the sample for today.
yeah. And I think it's showing up pretty well on the camera. Sometimes the reds get a little oversaturated in my camera setup, but I think we're getting some decent color on this one here. So I start by taking it sort of full power, and I'm not really sure. Some of this has evolved from trying some different things. Exactly the rhyme or reason for the exact shape that I've done, but I like it, and it's become my thing. So you'll see here, I've got a little bottle of, it's just a little couple ounce bottle of water here. I keep on my desk with a dropper. So after I do the full power swatch, I'll leave some ink on the tool, and then I do a bit of an ink wash. So I kind of keep it where it's full strength over here and a little bit of a wash here. In part, this is, if you see people do other swatching, you might see chromatography being done. The chromatography can show how an ink separates and can give you some information about what sort of dyes might have been used, what might be colors are kind of making up what an ink is. So there's some information in there. It also is helpful to me as someone who will do painting and art with inks. And so I sort of do this washed out version at the representation of the color at the bottom of the card here. And I've got either an inky towel or a shop towel. This is my flour sack towel. Is a good low fiber towel. Keeps one of those at hand for washing off the tools. Since I do this on stream, this water bottle also doubles as a way to rinse the tools into a little glass here. I can do that and wipe it off, and I make sure that I'm not cross-contaminating inks, and we're ready to go. So that's it with the spoon. So we're going to put the spoon back. And then I started doing these cards with a calligraphy dip nib. I got this one after trying some different ones because it doesn't flex too much when you're working between regular fountain pen ink and calligraphy inks. The calligraphy inks or India ink, that sort of stuff that you do not want to put into your fountain pen, it's thicker. So if you have a regular calligraphy nib, it might be too flexy, and it breaks the tension of the ink between the tines, and you'll get railroading. But this one kind of makes the writing a little fancier, gives me some different line widths. Private Reserve. I do sometimes have to focus just on the spelling, because if I'm talking while I do this, I will write the wrong thing. So this is kick, start. I just gotta read it. Kickstart, my heart red. Red.
Now, how often do you have to change those nibs out? Because I know some of those calligraphy nibs can kind of get brittle or rusty over time. What's the lifespan you normally have on one of those nibs?
Uh, it does vary based on how much I'm doing, but I do have to switch them out at least several times per year. So I'm not good at keeping track of time, but I was going to estimate about every, maybe a month if I'm doing a lot of swatching, or a couple months. This will wear out. The flexing, this metal is actually kind of brittle. It's an older metal. Some of these are a little vintagey, not super vintage, but it's a vintage style for sure. Some of the ones I picked up, some of the ones are more new. It depends on where I got them, but they're kind of brittle, so they will eventually snap from being used, or they start oxidizing, or what, I don't know, metals, but where the flow will start getting pretty rough. So these are the ones that do not last forever. And private reserve ink, spelling again. Kickstart, my heart red.
Guess this is a longer ink name than normal.
Yeah. So, and I'm not, my handwriting, you don't have to have perfect handwriting to be into all of this. My handwriting is mostly legible, and that's the bar that I strive for. But, do the nice little swirls here. And I got some extra. Sometimes the water here, I'm getting them. But I keep a silicone placemat on my desk so that all inky messes are easily wiped away. So that's my main swatching process to do the coloring and the Colodex. Again, just do a little quick rinse of the tool here. Sometimes I get stuff on the handle, and try and keep that clean enough that it doesn't transfer to the next ink, or if I'm swatching a bunch in a row. But easy peasy cleanup right there. I'm going to move these. Let's see. Move them over here. Keep them on screen a little bit and show. So that's for my sort of archive of all the inks. The Colodex back there, and the rings either hang on my wall here or go gallivanting in the bag. The other tool that is a little easier to find than my weird spoon, and I have found some other weird carving tools that work too. You can look around and try and find stuff that's similar. This is a little one. The problem with some of these is they're very stabby on this side, so be careful. This is the favored one, the first one I found. But looking for something that would be a little more accessible for more people, I wanted to try a bunch of different things. So I tried a bunch of different things, and the thing that worked best was it was this one, I'm hitting all the cameras, a laboratory like stir rod. So this one's a longer rod, glass stir rod, just made out of probably, I think most of these are borosilicate glass, pretty durable. But now, these days, with some of the eco-friendly initiatives, you can find shorter ones that are more for like replacing a coffee stirrer or a cocktail stirrer. So these 6-inch ones I find are really great. And so I will swatch, in addition to those cards, on a bunch of different papers with this. So with this, you'll see it sticks on. You can get quite a bit of ink, and it will vary a little bit ink to ink, different viscosities and such. But I get a pretty good dip, can do a whole swirl here. So that was Ireful paper. This is Midori cotton. I'll just, 1 or 2 dips, just do a little swirl. And then I get some areas where it pools here. I get some areas, I might let it kind of start running low on the pen or on the rod here, and get some thinner stuff around the edges that kind of show what it might look like in a finer nib, and get some interesting variation in the color. And then just throw the nice thing about this is I can have a whole bunch of these ready to go. Throw it in there, clean them all later, and then I will use a dip pen. This is my favorite for this sort of writing. This is the Pilot Iro Tsushi. This is a medium. There's a medium and a fine. This one I think is a really good representation, as close as you can get with a regular kind of dip pen without a feed and everything, of what fairly standard, maybe Western medium nib is. It's not super fine, like a Japanese nib might be. And then I'll just put the, information here. So this gives me a pretty good approximation of what it might look like in sort of, especially a lot of my pens at least start out as a medium.
And this is how
made it on a dip.
It's always great to see the comparisons, because Lisa will carry around these different papers, and I believe she's going to show that how the paper can make a big difference with ink, how it dries and how it shows. Some papers kind of lock ink in before it has its chance to naturally change, like Teranishi Gentle Green is one that I always think of. But testing on different papers, that's one thing that I love seeing, that it's like I said, like having a local ink encyclopedia to see how, I bought this new notebook. It has this paper. What's this ink going to look like? And, more often than not, Lisa's going to be like, oh, here you go. Here's this paper. Here's these inks on this paper. It's great to see that.
Yeah. So we'll look at that. I will show one more thing that I should have showed earlier. With doing the wash down here, what I'll come in later and do is sketches onto the cards. And so that's sort of another reason why I do the shadow, is because it makes a nice base for doing the sketching, which is kind of an art project. And when I do the sketches, I look into, this is just me vamping while I change my desk situation over. I look up like what, this ink is named after a plant. So we got the plant. Black ivy is fairly self-explanatory. Some of these others are from, a work of literature. Here's the aforementioned gentle green. This is some of the art from the box. This one is jeans, so there's the jeans. This one's about a location, so there's the swamp of Louisiana. So that helps me get in touch with sort of the naming of the inks and some other details about the company that's making them and that sort of thing. So if you're going to have 1,000 inks, it's nice to spend some time with them in that way. So now that I've switched over, we'll go back to your original comment here about seeing the inks on different papers. So here are 3 papers that I like to compare because they can give a really... so this is one of the things I did early on, is start doing these swatches on multiple papers. I had like 14 papers. So a lot of them were various versions of Tomoe River, but these 3 kind of show the good breadth. So this is what I like to compare. So what we've got on top here is Life Bank paper. What's here in the middle is Tomoe River, and then on the bottom is Cosmo Air Light, which is very similar to Ireful. So both of those papers showing this example will be very similar, and Ireful being the more available version now. But we talked about Gentle Green, where this one looks much bluer. Sabi Midori is the same thing, where those colors, the liquid ink has this more blue shade to it, and it kind of changes to the greener or tealer version when it dries, but it doesn't do that on this paper. Whereas here, you've got Diamine Salamander. This one has more blue to it on these papers, and it's more brown on this. So it depends on the ink, what sort of dyes are used. I'll shift this over a little bit more. You can see this one here. I'll point out the, I get above my head here, the Teranishi Guitar Opera Rose is sort of a pinkish hue here. Here it's a little more pink orange, and here it's more orange. We've got a whole bunch of the Sailor Urameku inks over on this side, which we've got this sort of vibrant blurple here, much more purple here. So when you're swatching your inks, it's important to think about what sort of papers you'll be using, what sort of colors you're looking for, how much do you care that it looks the same on different things. If something like this is really gonna say, oh, I matched this green ink with the green pen and now it looks blue, like what's up with that sort of thing, you can use swatching as a way to help prepare yourself for what you'll get into with different pens. So similar to those papers here, I've been swatching. This is part of the Sailor Mano line. Keep going left when I need to go right. With the, I think 35 colors of Sailor Mano. This is sort of a selection of different ones. I'm going to angle this here so you can see, in particular, watch these inks and this ink in the corner. So this first paper is a fairly more of an everyday sort of paper, not super coated, which is part of what shows you the fancier ink properties. The Nebula Note from Colorverse. We'll flip the page to bank paper, and these purpley inks all of a sudden are bright green. And this ink down here in the corner that was more of a beigey taupe is now more of a brown taupe. And then we'll flip the paper again, and we'll get back to more of that purple with just a bit of green chroma shading. And now this one down here in the corner is like a blue-gray color. All three of those down here where my fingers are, same ink. And then we've got a fourth paper. So this one is Ireful. And the last paper here is Tomoe River, kind of the new Sanzen version. And you can see between these two, they're similar, but you're getting a little bit more purple on this one. And this one down here in the corner, yet again, we get 1, 2, 3 here. 4 is, there we go. I mean, these look like 4 different inks. So paper really makes a big difference. And those are 4 papers that I think show a nice range of what differences you might experience. Nebula Note, bank paper, Ireful, and Tomoe River.
So one question while you're showing that real quick.
Yeah.
Obviously that is not, you're not going to find a notebook that has 4 different papers. Talk about how you came about using that kind of ringed notebook system so you can have that easy page by page comparison of different papers so you can really show those properties. Like, did you start with that, or is that something that you just were looking for an easier way to compare the papers? You know, that I like that notebook that you can literally do that and have 4 pages in a row of different papers. So just kind of talk about that notebook, what it is, and how you kind of came to start using that.
Yeah, so where we started was these loose sheets of paper, so basically A5 versions of the paper. This is one of my first inky notebooks. This is a New Wood Fiber NWF notebook, inky notebook from Franklin Christoph that's in the Traveler's style. And so I just took one of the bands and stuffed all these loose papers in. That's why they're all folded in the middle. So this is where I started, and this is cool, and then you can hand the papers out, but also you end up playing, 20 swatch card pickup pretty easily. So I was looking for another solution. So this notebook, this one's a little customized. I had to try and make an A5 version because this is a product from America where we don't believe in those numbers mostly. There's a junior size and a big size, so I kind of cut this one down, but I've been using the TUL, T-U-L, disc-bound system from Office Depot, Office Max for a long time for work before I got into fountain pens, because the paper is really good with gel pens as well. Turns out the paper is also pretty good with that. So I already had a whole bunch of tool stuff and the discs and everything lying around, and I had a punch for that. So I was looking at, like, there's ring bound systems and there's this, and then there's sort of the folded up bind your own sort of banded systems. But since I had the discs and the punch, this became the natural way for me to go without investing too much in new stuff. I will say that some of these papers, so this is a version of Tomoe River. If you're familiar with this paper, it's very thin, and so these little tabs don't stay too well. So that one is having a hard time staying in. I have reinforced some of these papers with a little strip of it's just label paper. It's hard to see, but there's just a little strip here, basically a sticker, the sort of label paper that you would use in your printer to print an address label and then stick it onto your UPS package or whatever. That you can see it right here a little bit. There's a bit of a color difference. I've reinforced some of the thinner papers with that to help the disc bound work, but that way, all these different experiments. Here's an experiment where this is the cotton swab, and this is a whole bunch of non-porous tools. And you can see a lot of these look the same and give you more character, whereas the cotton swab is a lot flatter, doesn't allow the ink to pool very well. This is where I was like, basically anything that's non-porous is going to give the sort of swatch, at least that I'm looking for. That can vary, and if this is what you're used to, and I didn't like the waste of the cotton swabs either. Again, a bazillion inks, but if you have a more modest collection, that's less of an issue. But I really like the pooling of all of these different things. So that's why I say, sort of in general, a non-porous tool. You might have a glass dip pen where the end, that one's a little twisty, maybe something more like this, where the end of your glass dip pen happens to be a lot like this. You might have random tools in your kit. I've tried things like silicone makeup brushes that are the sort of reusable replacement to a foam brush. Just anything that is non-porous that the ink might stick to. Experiment, try stuff that might be just around, instead of trying to find exactly what maybe I'm using or somebody else is using. We've famously, Ink Dependence Mike has an artisanally bent letter opener. That works great too. So just got to find something that will fit in the bottle or the sample and sample vials or whatever, and just playing around with it.
No, I really like that page, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in a further question. But you and I helped doing the Pen Show After Dark events in Arkansas, and seeing people look at that sheet where it showed the cotton swab versus the other tools, you could see their eyes like they got it. It's just looking at that in person and seeing what a difference the tools made. That was really cool to experience, of seeing people realize, wait, there might be a better way, because you don't think about it. If all you knew was cotton swabs, that was kind of how I started. And now that I've been going through and re-swatching, it's you do get better color, and that was always cool to see. But let's move forward a little bit, and what you're doing now. This is commonly what you might see on one of your Twitch streams. Either this or art. Kind of talk about how you got into streaming your art experiments and adventures, and you do talk about what you do on your weekday streams versus your weekend. Just kind of talk about that in general, and kind of how you got started in streaming.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started streaming because being coming into this world with the podcast network, Relay FM, one of the founders of Relay FM, they're a St. Jude family. And so they take September, which is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, for St. Jude. And should I get these out? I've been very proud to be part of their campaigns. We've got these fun coins for several years now when they were able to open it up because of all the great tools that St. Jude has. St. Jude partners with, they just had their summit. They partner with all these Twitch streamers. They have assets, they have graphics and all this progress bars, all these tools paired with between Tiltify and the stuff that ALSAC, which is the fundraising branch of St. Jude, has to give you all these tools for streaming. So that was a way where I was like, I'm really, the more I learn about St. Jude, I really appreciate the way that they are able to do what they do, all the things that they do. Every time I learn more about how they're helping the families going through this horrible diagnosis experience, helping the kids, the patients, the doctors, the research, the spreading it around the world, I was like, I want to help with that. I'm behind what Relay is doing every year, and I can donate money, but maybe I could do more. So they had all these tools, which kind of made it seem like, well, I like doing this ink stuff. I've been watching all these other people do inks and stationery and stuff on even Lego stuff on stream. I do ink station Lego and such too. What can I do? So, even though, I don't feel like I was the typical high energy sort of streamer, but there's lots of streamers. And so I just went with who I am and what I could bring to the table and started streaming for the month of September, like 2 Septembers ago. So a little over a year and a half ago now. And did that, and then I didn't stop. So kept going, got a lot of support from the pen addict community and the stationery community in general. People show up and we hang out and we talk about inks and pens and whatever's going on. So it took a while to work out a schedule, but at this point, these days, I have some work from home days and some in the office days, which was, sort of staggering my mornings. And so I decided to slot into some of my work from home days that instead of just, rolling out of bed and doing the minimum to get parked at the computer to do work, that I could take some time in the morning to do the inks and the swatching. So I have my setup here, I set up the desk, and during those Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 7:30 to 9 a.m. Central, so before I have to start work at 9, and also before the Pen Addict starts streaming at 9, which is when I go back to my original habit of watching people stream while I sort of co-working buddies. I'll do the swatching like this. I'll do the sketching on the cards. I'll, if I've got a new pen or something or a new tool, we'll try it out. We'll talk about it. I'm always open for questions. People ask questions, ask for ink recommendations. I share anything that I've learned. One thing I really like about streaming is, I can put myself out there and people can come and hang out. And as I, was absorbing all this information, talking with other people, sharing what I've learned and having other people ask questions, that is how I expand my knowledge of all of this. So we do the various things and people ask questions and I'm like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Or, that's an area that has not been as important to me thus far, but let's explore that. So that's mostly the Tuesday, Thursday stream, sometimes a bonus stream here and there when I can get it. But then on Sundays, since I was doing the art and the sketches and stuff can fall into that too, that those can go either way. I started, let's see, around, I don't know if it was February, I think it's in here. The Dominant Industry Company came out with the ink archiving book. So this May of 2024 is when I started with this book, and this really became the heart of doing Sunday art streams, where this book has these, too many painted pages here, these empty pages that are already designed on fountain pen friendly paper, nice thick paper that color-wise responds a lot like Cosmo Air or Ireful. Very, interesting. Sometimes the colors shift a little bit, but very good at showing properties of inks. And it's just set up where you can swatch in the back, you can pick a page, establish a color palette, and paint. And this was taking me between 2 or 3 hours to do an inky page, which was a little bit longer than I had on Tuesday, Thursdays. So trying to make room in my life to make time for art became very important to me as a person, and my well-being is my day job is on a computer all the time and such, and a lot of digital hobbies of video games or whatever. I really wanted some analog stuff, and doing the art was really fun. So I get an ink palette. I've got these ceramic ones, and then a water brush. I lost my good water brush. It's on my desk somewhere. This is a more inexpensive one, but any kind of water brush is fine. I just take one water brush, the drips of ink, and then sit and paint these pages with different palettes. Sometimes it might be a bunch of new inks. Sometimes I pick a palette of inks and it kind of turns into a bit of a clashy mess. These books feel intimidating, but it's like you just got to get in there. Here's one where I mixed inks. The CMYK colors. So those are the 4 inks I used. And these are all inks I mixed. So sometimes that's a little more arty. Other times it's just more of a straight sampling of different inks. And so this has become a really peaceful, here's another mixing one, just a really peaceful way to spend some time on a Sunday exploring various art things. And I'll do some other stuff from time to time, but this has been the main thing. And then this year they came out with a new one. So now I've got a new theme to explore besides the undersea, some more like fantasy themes and cats. There's a lot of cats in this one. So.
No, and that's, I hadn't really ever been a Twitch viewer until a couple of months ago. And I've been watching these, and my wife enjoys me watching this because other YouTube can be loud in the morning. So this is like a nice, calm, easy way. But a couple of things that I appreciate about your Twitch is you don't want to monetize it. You do it with, you do it for you and let other people experience it with you. And you're not trying to make it into a side gig or something, when that's unique, I think, in that world. And that makes it cool. That's just a different way to do that, where you're getting to share this experience and this art with other people, because the community, people will ask a question and you might not see it, and 3 or 4 people have already answered different answers in the chat. There's a good kind of regular group, and then random people will pop in as they're able to, at times. And that's neat to see, just the interaction. It's, you kind of have your own little community that, the regular people start recognizing names, and, you might not know their real name, but you know their screen name, and okay, that's the person who lives here and they like this, so you kind of build that up in that little community, which I think is really cool. And so one thing that's often referenced in the streams, and probably the other thing that you're becoming more well known for than inking in a way, is the Ink Pony Club. So talk about how that came to be, what it is, and just its origins, and if someone wants to get involved and do a painting of an ink pony, how does that work, and how can they get it put up on the Ink Pony site?
Absolutely. So the Ink Pony Club started as long before I was streaming. I am a regular haunting of all the other stationery streamers, but especially the Pen Addict, because that's where the community I started in. So Brad of the Pen Addict was he just got a bunch of inks from Gourmet Pens and some other people at the Philadelphia Pen Show. So he was having a stream. He had a song stuck in his head. You might be able to guess what song that was, and made the stream title Ink Pony Club. So everybody then had that song stuck in their head, and people in the chat were talking about, what would an ink pony look like? And everybody sort of had a different idea of what their ink pony would look like. There were different colors. It's like, well, it has to be pink, right? It's like other people are saying, I want to picture something more like this. And it was a really interesting conversation. And then couple weeks go by, and Brad keeps streaming, and boy, that song, it really gets stuck in your head. There'd be like frequent little hums of the refrain and such. So it was stuck in my head for like 2 weeks. So it was stuck in my head. I was sort of getting on the computer and sitting down to do some other creative stuff, maybe trying to, I don't know, do stuff for my branding or whatever. That spoiler, that didn't happen. Instead, I'm like, I'm going to make a pony. So I made a pony in Illustrator. So this is just a vector outline of a pony as a coloring sheet. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. Something I tried in the past is printing out on A4. I've got a laser printer, just black ink laser printer, printing out on Cosmo Airlight. I think it was the first thing I did on a fountain pen friendly paper, A4 size with the laser ink. The laser ink stays in place and you can paint on this, and it's fountain pen friendly, so the colors are going to pop. So I made this outline, and I was just going to do something on stream. I was like, hey, I'm trying to do the art. It's like, I'm going to print this out. I got some different sizes. It's all the same graphic, but I'm going to print this out on some fountain pen friendly paper. I'm going to share the, a transparent ping version of it. So if you want to print out your own and print with, and ink with me, or, maybe if we do this for a little while, maybe I can mail some out to people, and let's just have some fun. So I don't know. I don't, at this point, I don't remember which ones were. These were some of the first ones I did. So, just doing colorful stuff. When the Ink Pony Club, when people were talking about what their ink pony was look like, what I thought of was my inky towel. It's sort of like a white horse. Maybe it was sort of inspired by the Wizard of Oz, I don't know, but sort of a white horse that all of a sudden has all these inky splotches in the rainbow of colors. And so I was like, ink ponies can be all the colors. It's sparkly inks, let it bleed, give them a background, something a little more muted, my earth tones, all sorts of stuff. It's a fun way to explore the ink. It's a fun way to get artsy, and everybody can color. So I'm like, here, color with me. It's relaxing. It could be a distraction from other stresses in life. Let's paint some ink ponies. We'll sing a song. We'll have some fun. So I did that, and then was in one of Brad's streams shortly after I sort of shared it on my little corner. And it was like, so can I share one? He was doing the painting in the dominant industry book. And I said, so I did one more like painting thing. Can we, do you mind if I share this? So I shared this, and then he started also running with it, and it became a bigger thing. Shortly after that, he printed it out, or I sent him, I can't remember. He got one, and was going to paint on stream. I'm trying to remember the order of operations, but I was in California right before the California Pen Show that's in LA, and he was also going to be at the show, but I was there early. It was Wednesday for the podcast. I'm listening to the podcast live, as I usually do. It's very early in the morning in California. At that point, you're three time zones earlier than Penn Eastern time, and I'm just trying to get up and around for the day, and got the shout out on the podcast. So I'm like, oh boy, we've gone mainstream. So, but that was fun. So I shared all this, but I'm gonna pull up here the website. We're just gonna cover my face for a second here. So I just put this up. I'm like in California, editing this page on my phone a little bit with some of the more context, because it was sort of a Twitch inch joke. And so here's the graphic. I'm like, here, you can download this and do this. Here's some that I did. So those must be the first ones that I did, because that's what we did the picture of my little ink, another one of my ink palettes. I was like, here are mine. I want to see yours. And so here are we got some local friends, we got some online friends. These two were painted live at the after hours hangout in California at the bar seating area. Brought inks, brought tools, water brush, and these are painted by members of the community. You'll recognize some of these names. Some of these people have sent to me. Sometimes they just send me a picture. This one here with the spots, Brad did on stream. Carola did on stream too. She's beautiful floral painting. That's her signature around her ponies. We've got just all sorts of ones that were sent in. This one right here might be familiar from my interview host here. These next three were the Atlanta Pen Show, all sorts of stuff that all the different colors, all the different styles. Like I said, anybody can do it. So the Ink Pony Club, the TLDR, too late now, of the story is this is my effort to help people who have a lot of inks, who are interested in this, sort of an outstretched hand to say, are you interested in being more creative, more inky, but you're like, I don't know how to paint. I don't even know where to start. Here's a place to start. I'll make it super easy. I'll bring to shows paint palettes, and I got these little water brushes that were inexpensive, easy to share and hand out. I did frame one. This was one that I ended up with that Pen Addict painted in Atlanta. Oh, now I've turned my light off.
Well, one thing this kind of goes into my next question, so I'm going to segue a little bit. So you inadvertently set yourself up in a way to run unofficial panels of sorts at pen shows.
Yeah.
At the Atlanta show, you kind of set up in the corner at the bar and said, "Hey, here's stuff," because this is kind of like Lisa's version of Bob Ross. Art's for everybody.
Yeah.
Here's some tools. Do art. Your version. There's no wrong way to paint it. So, in that vein, now that it's become kind of a mainstream thing, like you said, and you helped run a panel at the last minute with me where we kind of got drafted in the Middle Tennessee Pen Club helping out at the Arkansas show, and then you did your kind of unofficial setup. So that seems like something you enjoy doing, sharing that, putting the tools in the hands of people so they can just show up and do art. So do you have any plans to try and do that in a more official capacity at other shows in the future, or teach swatching classes or anything like that?
I would love to do more of that. Like I said, interacting with other people is also how I can learn and grow and do stuff, but also going back to the non-monetization, I have a jobby job. It's fine. I've worked hard to build that career that takes care of my needs there. This is for the joy and for the community, and I just have a really big passion for supporting the community, for meeting people, for making friends, for all of this. And because extending a little bit before finding fountain pens, maybe 7-8 years ago, I really started making more time and space in my, we all have busy schedules, where art was important and it was transformative to my life. But I needed a push, and I want to be able to share that, whether it's the swatching, whether it's the art, to just help people grow wherever they're at, in a way that maybe they just also need, again, not a push necessarily, but a welcome, a place to start. And I definitely have a passion for doing that more. I would love to be more involved in doing panels, doing stuff in our local community, especially. We've got a couple of very great stationery shops within an hour of where I'm at, and being involved there, being involved at our local pen club, being involved in pen shows, just anywhere where there's community, taking it from Twitch where I can show to being in person where I can say, now it's your turn. You can do this. It's easy, everybody can color. We're just going to do this. Takes a lot of the question about it and just sit down, have some fun, explore it. It's not, it may not be perfect. You may need to practice it, but that's not the point. The point is to get in there and do it. Explore these inks. So we have so many chroma shading inks, shimmer inks, dark inks that when you hit them with some water, bloom into these colors you'd never expect. And just being able to share, since it was inks and color, color has always been very important to my life. As soon as I was able to, I started painting all the walls different colors, colorful stuff in my environment. Color has always been very important to me, and finding inks was a new way to express that. And I'd love to have the opportunity to share that with more people.
No, so if you happen to be involved with a show and you're looking for a panelist, reach out to Lisa for sure, because that was one thing. Just at the night before the Arkansas show, I sent Lisa a message saying, "Hey, I got drafted in. Didn't really have anything with me. I mean, I could talk about YouTube a little, but I was like, I know Lisa carries around her magical rickshaw bag of swatching and could probably set up a panel within like 10 minutes. So she was able to grab a couple extra supplies, and just being a part of that and seeing the reaction of people when you're putting one of those glass rods in their hand and saying,
Mhm.
here's inks, do a swatch. Here's the little swatch cards with the cutouts,
Yeah,
like the wear and goal or the other, a lot of the people hadn't seen that before, and they're
yeah,
doing that. They're doing hands on, and that's
yeah,
something that not all classes and panels, sometimes someone talking at the front is very different than you putting a tool in the hand and say, here's ink, do it, try it, experiments or experience it, because
yeah,
then now they can take that back and, hey, I did that, and then they can go do it again at home and find out if that's going to be the right tool for them. And like I said, when a lot of those people saw that sheet with the Q-tip versus the other tools, you could see in their eyes, it's like, oh, that it they had never occurred. You go with what you
yeah,
know until you don't know, and there might be a better way. And you might still want to use Q-tips, but you might also want to do Q-tips and something else, because you never know what's going to work for you. But so as we're wrapping up, just tell everybody, where they can find you online between website, social media, streaming, and whatnot, so that if they want to see more of what you're doing, how they can find your Twitch streams, your website, your pin show write-ups and things like that. Just kind of
mhm,
talk through where you hang out on the internet.
yeah. So again, to reference my day job, I am basically a front end web developer. So HTML, CSS is my wheelhouse. Also working with a CMS, which is a content management system. Uh, with all the changing landscape of social media, I kind of wanted a space on the internet that could be my own, with different things spawning up in communities, or you end up with a place where maybe they're doing stuff that you're not super thrilled about, all sorts of different ways. I wanted a space that was my own, so that is my home base now. It is my website. It is currently pretty static. I will be moving into something more elaborate at some point. It's, like I said, it's a hobby. We'll get there when I get there, but and trying to do more personal writing, more longer form writing than just um, part of what really started that was when the questions started going around, like 21 pen questions and 5 more pen. There's all these things going around where people are answering all these things, and it's like, well, where can I post that? I don't have a site. I could do it on. I was off Twitter by that, whatever it is, and by that point, but I was like, I can do it on like Mastodon, or Blue Sky came later, but it's like these long threads of all these different answers. It was a mess. So I wanted to have a website. So my home base right now is oliveoctopus.ink is the website. I'm trying to do some more longer form writing of shows. I did my own question list, sent that out into the world, 17 ink questions. I'd pick 17 just to be an oddly, cantankerous number. It's like something prime. And so to go out with some of the other questions. So that was sort of where I started there. But I do still post a little bit too. I'm currently on Mastodon and Blue Sky, also on Instagram, post sporadically different places, and then Twitch, obviously. So, most days, most weeks, 3 days a week on Twitch. And then occasionally you'll find me lurking in Discords and Pen Addict Slack. But pretty much Olive Octopus Inc. or oliveoctopus.ink everywhere will get you to me. So,
And then also, the Ink Pony Club has its own website
mhm.
now as well. What's that
Yeah,
website
that's
address?
so that is inkpony.club. Club is another fun URL. It does currently, redirect to my site, so it's all interlinked. But inkpony.club will get you there. So
Yeah, and
inkpony.club, and if you want
I,
stickers,
yeah, I think your stickers showed up the day after you got to Atlanta or something like that, where
yeah,
they
I
were
got the
just
stamps in time, but it was one of those things where either I rush the design and mess it up, or I could have had an inferior sticker maybe in time, but I tried to do it right, and yeah, it showed up Monday after I got back. But that's got to keep the USPS busy. So if you go to the inkpony.club site, I offer if the USPS will if I could put a stamp, international or domestic stamp on, and get it out to you, I'm happy to send papers to paint on and stickers and stuff. Well, as long as for now, as long as I can keep up with the demand, happy to share. Again, if we can't meet in person, so.
No, and that's great. So definitely follow Lisa, online, and she has RSS on her website. That's a great thing. There's a lot of good stationery sites that have RSS feeds, so you can get just the articles without the fluff, and that's kind of nice to have a focused reading list. Some of the ones I can think of: Pen Addict, Gentleman Stationer, Well Appointed Desk, RB's, something of Curiosities. I can't believe it. I can't remember the exact name, but I'll put some of those in the notes as well. So be sure and follow all that. And Lisa, thanks again for taking some time. This was, when I had the idea to add this interview series with having someone local, you helped me beta test this before episode 1 to make sure the software and whatnot would work. And we finally got a chance to get some time to do where you could show the ink swatching process, because it's different. People might not have seen it, and it can really be a way for them to change their swatching or expand their horizons. And the fact that you love teaching people, this is just another way to reach a new audience who you can, interact with hopefully more in the future. But thanks again. And for if you're listening, don't forget the audio version is available on Apple and Spotify. But for this one especially, make sure you're checking out the video version on YouTube so you can see all the examples that Lisa provided. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Stay inky.